I think was really important. I found it really hard to think about my marae. I had to start with the female first because I know that very well. I come from a family of 4 girls, or women, chicks, babes, female babes. And then also as a woman to think about how to represent men or masculinity in a way that's very strong and powerful, but not falling into a kind of a testosterone. I mean, that's not the right terminology, but there's in male carving, a lot of the male figures will have big hard-ons, big penises, and there's upstanding. That might mean that they're ready for battle, or that chief is in a position to have many, many people in his tribe. And so that's not really the way that I wanted to include men within this body of work. So it's trying to find a language that talks about vitality and strength, but finding a new language in which to speak about it. So the Maui photograph, he's a very, very important figure. He's a demigod, and he fished up the South Island. He slowed down the sun. He turned his sister's husband into a dog. I mean, he was really naughty. He was a trickster. So I didn't want to kind of replicate those ideas. I thought, as a person, what would he do on the weekend? He'd go surfing. And it seemed incredibly appropriate because his full name is Maui Tiki Tiki Ataranga. And he is a demigod because he was actually almost born dead as a fetus, and his mother cut off her hair and put this fetus and pushed him out into the water. So he has a very strong relationship with the water. So it's just trying to find new ways of thinking about these figures and what they mean and what's the essence of them and how they are. And I suppose like the dandy figure is very important. This is a beautiful work of my friend Victor, and he spoke to me as a takatapui man, some of the stories that he would hear. So embarking on creating this sort of photographic language and imaging, he talked to me about when the first ships would come to the shore, his knowledge from his point of view, these really highly versed men would be sent out to meet and talk to the ships, whatever is on these ships, because they didn't know what language they spoke. As a kind of an in-between person, they have access to different types of knowledge, and also as men that aren't part of the procreation of the tribe, in a way they're expendable, so you can send them out and work with it in those kind of ways. So it's quite dark, but he's actually standing by the water, waiting and looking out to sea.
And then I guess it brings you a little bit to urban warrior in terms of that different idea of masculinity. I think that I remember that you told me that that's taken off a particular sculpture in Auckland, and at the time people thought that it wasn't, am I right in saying that they thought he wasn't warrior-like enough?
Yes.
And that you took on kind of those comments to then recreate something?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting work because there's a sculptor called Molly McAllister who has this very important sculpture which is on this foreshore on the waters downtown Auckland. And when it was unveiled in the early 60s, everyone complained because he wasn't sort of like holding up melee or, doing a kind of, hardcore stance. But I found that really interesting because in a way it was the sorts of things that I was struggling with or thinking about. And so within this, there's a number of different types of language. He's actually standing in front of the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and that's been a really important site for protest for Ngāti Whātua. We made this cloak out of leather, and there's a history within New Zealand of it being the, not quite the fruit bowl, but we fed the colonies, so we have a huge farming culture, and in a way that's been a real breakdown of our ecological, all those kind of aspects, and also thinking that a lot of Maori ended up working in the freezing works, and that actually set about the breakdown of tribal society. So there's kind of a lot of ideas I was thinking about in terms of how to clothe this particular figure. And the model is Lawrence Macaulay, and he's famous for being in Lord of the Rings. So he brings in other aspects to it, to the story. But what I did find out afterwards was that it was his uncle that had modelled for the original sculpture. So it was.
It all came back full circle.
Yeah, it all came back full circle, and that was really thinking about for me, because I live in Auckland. It's not my home. I needed to work with somebody from Ngāti Whātua too. It was very important, because if I was going to get told off, I'd get told off in my own city, which is fair enough. And so I spent quite a long time trying to find the right person to be that model. And then it came together, and those are those lovely aspects that come about. And I suppose that's the integrity that comes with maybe intuitively trying to find your way. In some ways I don't have a person to kind of guide me through, so I have to really rely on my feeling about what seems to be an appropriate way forward.
Yeah.
And I think that I just wanted to touch on that idea too for the film A Maori Dragon Story, which is playing next door. I had an artist in residence in the South Island in the 1991, I think it was. And I'd heard this particular story, oral history from the area, and it took a really long time. Like I did set about asking for permission, and so I went to the Kaitahi Trust Board, who are the iwi of that area, and they're very organised, and because there's less, it was easy to identify where to go and ask for permission. So I set about doing that. And they wouldn't see me. It took about 4 or 5 months of sitting outside. They only met once a month as a group of people. And eventually I did see them and get permission. A few people had said to me, "Oh, why don't you just start the film? Because you're going to get permission." And I said, "Well, there's no point in asking for permission unless you see it through." And I think by waiting for that permission, other things kind of kick in, because then you have the blessing of the tribe, etc. That particular film was about a taniwha, like this Marakiha figure here. 2 years after completing the work, a Maori historian came to me and he said, "Well, you do realise that's your taniwha, and you always had permission to make that work, because there's 2 of them. They have a relationship with the South Island and the North Island." So it's those are really nice coincidences that happen in your work.